George Kilpatrick Inspiration for the Nation, celebrating people we feel good about. Children's book illustrator Melquea Smith is in the house. Part of the final installation of our series looking at some of the folks who will be part of the Martin Luther King Jr. celebration dinner at Syracuse University. At the time of this conversation, it will be tonight at 6 p.m., actually at 5 p.m., with an art gallery available at 4:15 if you got your dinner ticket at mlk.syr.edu. I hope it's not sold out by the time you hear or see this. But for those of you who already have your tickets, you'll get to see the fabulous children's illustrations of Melquea Smith. And Melquea, thank you for joining us on the program. And love the background. That purple you see, it goes with my my fraternity color. So we're so glad to have you aboard. So tell us about your art and how you got started.
Oh my God, how I got started. Okay. That rolls me back. Well, when I was a little one, I honestly have always been an artist, a creative, an illustrator, a drawer. I've always been a type of person who just needed to draw and needed to create and do something with my hands in order to just feel like myself. Um, I would see things on TV, I would watch movies, play video games, and I just somehow needed to have that translate into the paper that I was underneath my fingertips. And as much as I drove my family crazy with having paper and crayons and pencils everywhere to prevent me from drawing on the walls, my dad would take home computer paper. My aunt would give me these like ceramic paint by numbers,
Mhm.
like paint by numbers, or these like ceramic like sculptures that you could paint with the acrylic paints and all sorts of stuff. And so my family, was really supportive of me being able to express myself creatively. And so as I've grown up, I grew up on the age of dial-up slash the internet. So yeah, when your parent, like when someone
Wait,
calls,
don't call me.
right,
I'm on the internet.
right. Or my sister would call and I was like, tell Ellie to get off the phone. I'm trying to get her on the internet. So I'm that generation where I definitely remember when the internet was being important, and also now in this age of social media where internet is all folks know. And so I grew up on Yold DeviantArt, this website where artists was able to share their work.
Hmm.
And I eventually started going into different sub fandoms and subcultures, all different things. And I practically grew up on the internet. And I learned, though, through that people got paid for their art. Like
Hmm.
people got commissioned and was able to, in a sense, make a living through their work. Um, and that was something that I've always wanted to do. I knew that I was going to be an artist of some capacity as I've gotten older. And that's definitely a privilege for sure, because I hear a lot of other artists who have had situations where their family was not supportive, or their family was not on board for their illustration career, and they had to fight for that. And for me, I'm grateful to say that this is just something that is just a part of my life and has always been.
Do you,
So yeah.
just looking at your work and the type of work that you do, like I describe your work as imaginative, free flowing, creative. How do you describe it?
Oh, that I like that. I like that a lot.
You like that?
Because
But let's
yeah,
go with that, right?
yeah,
You're
that
an
what you said.
imaginative, free flowing, creative artist.
I just go with the flow, and whatever feels right just works right.
like I'm no judge of art. I'm just looking at some of your pieces here, but there's just a I want to call it there's just a freedom, right? That that's the way I can describe it. I just just go with me kind of thing.
Yeah, it's interesting because as I was speaking with my art mentor, Chris, I would tell him all the time that my work is so tight. And it's interesting because I think it's tight in the way that I think about the pieces that I make. Um, like things that are intentional. So like why
Right.
are certain things intentional? Why did I choose the hair this way? Why did I choose certain clothing this way? And so
Hmm.
I find that tightness, but I also find the looseness in the way that I paint.
Hmm.
I interestingly enough, I actually identify myself as a painter
A
first.
painter, yeah.
I definitely identify as a painter more than a like drawer or a person who draws.
Hmm.
Drawing is a chore sometimes,
Hmm.
but the painting part, the colors, the melding it together, that magic, that's what really brings it to life for me. And I find that really interesting as I put myself in a career path in which I have to draw 32 plus pages in order to complete a project.
Right. And so you have to draw. So what describe that process for me? And so you still didn't describe your work. Well, you said you draw
Yeah.
it tight, but like I didn't hear you say this is what my work is. So let me hear that.
I would say my work, and this may change, but I would say on the fly,
Okay.
I'm definitely going to like back the imaginative. Um, this I think my work is a way for people to see that authenticity and be able to share that, like to be able to embrace that within themselves and
Hmm.
then share that with others.
Hmm.
And I also say this off the crux of working on a story idea
Hmm.
that like working on a manuscript right before we met about something about that kind of theme and
Hmm.
uh, that coreness of a story. So I'm just going to lean heavily into that and just use that because that's just something that I love. I love seeing the magic in everyday life. And I love seeing the magic of just being and existing in this world, especially as this world cannot always be magical. It's nice to be able to share that with others.
So, um, I wanted to follow up with what is your process for
Hmm.
creating? Because obviously you have to draw and then you have to paint and then you have to translate that into uh, a page that goes into a book.
Yeah. So for picture books specifically, um, art director, author, editor, someone contacts me and says, "Hey, we like your work. Here's a manuscript. Here's our budget. We'd like to see if you're interested in this thing. Let's say everything works good. We're done with all the negotiating bits and all the stuff." And I'm like, "Yeah, let's do it." So the beginning stages of a manuscript is me just reading it over and over and over and over
Hmm.
again.
Hmm.
Sometimes things just kind of pop into my head and I just need
Hmm.
to like get it down. And usually, so far, usually that actually translates throughout until the end piece of the book project. Um, an author illustrator named Ari Chung calls it a magical moment. And that is something that I like to keep on to while I'm working on a project. So the way that it starts though is just scrap paper, um, printer paper, and I start just kind of sketching what comes into my mind.
Hmm.
Sometimes it could be a character idea, sometimes it could be not really a location, but sometimes it's just something that really hits me when I'm reading someone else's words. Um, and I start really loose. I start with like a really busted up Sharpie marker so I don't get all into the details. Um, and that's kind of the beginnings, like scribbles, thinkings, drawings, words. I actually use a lot of words in my work, in the behind the scenes of my work. And I sometimes I'll be in the house pacing back and forth, thinking about like, okay, well, if I'm this character, what kind of shoes would I wear? Oh, like what kind of hair would they have? And what kind of color would make them blah blah blah. And a lot of discovery of the character and a lot of discovery of the story, color schemes, all of that. And most of it is not it's not linear. It's not a linear process. It's very free flowing in that sense too.
Right.
And it'll eventually like tumble into place because I have to rope it in and just like, all right, we need to actually put this in like an actual book. But that's the beginning stages. That's like the discovery blue sky phase, as like the animators would call it. Then we start getting into, I have a finish line, like I have a finished date that I need to get some stuff done. So now I have to get started with the actual sketches,
Right.
which are also very loose and messy because no
Mhm.
one's going to see these. These are like stick figures. Where are these people going to be placed? What's going to be in the background? How is this going to be structured? There's different parts of a story, when you're illustrating, where it's a full page spread versus one page versus a spot illustration, which is just a little vignette or just a small little snippet of an illustration. So I think about that as I'm working and like what would work best with the manuscript. Um, and that's why, and I start sketching those in, and it gets a little bit more refined, and I just do it in phases.
Right.
I'm working in phases. And then somehow, some way in this area, I have to figure out characters. Who's actually in the story? Who actually needs to be seen? What do they look like? And how do they present themselves and why?
But you already have the words, and that's why I think the pictures are so critical, right? Because you've got to match the picture to the words, and the pictures, especially with children's, really has to have more of the elements because it's only 4 or 5 words, maybe, depending on the
Right.
book, right? It could be,
Yeah.
and then she went, and then she tied her shoe, right? And whatever.
Sometimes though. So
Sometimes,
to
right, right,
me, a well-written story does not actually tell me what's going on. I can tell what's going on and I add on. So it could be two different stories. So for example, the illustrator is literally illustrating the antithesis of what is actually written,
oh, okay,
which usually is fun for comedy.
all right,
Um, there's a there's a situation where like there was a story that the author said, and the boys were sad. And the
right.
illustrator actually illustrated the boys not being sad because the parents were leaving. The boys were actually really happy. And that was really a funny comedic moment because we're reading the boys were sad and they weren't actually really sad. So it depends on the story and it depends on the mood of it and it depends on it. And to me, like I said before, like sometimes a well-written story has doesn't need to say, and she tied her shoe and
Right,
she
right,
pulled this thing
right,
out
right,
because the illustrator shows that.
right. I mean, that
Yeah.
was just my words. So,
No, that's okay. No, it depends. So there's different type. I could go on and on, but I'll
yeah,
I'll try to keep it brief. There are
right.
some parts of storytelling where you have something where it is like a storybook where the story itself is narrating what's going on and the illustrator follows along with it.
Mhm.
There's some stories that I have a bunch of books right now that I'm studying right now where um, it's a book, but it's in poetry,
Right,
and the poetic elements is just very loose and free flowing, and yet the illustrator now has to find a way to ground this poetic story in a sense while also honoring the art form of the author. um, One of the books I'm staring right at is called Eyes That Speak to the Stars by Joanna Ho and illustrated by Jung Ho. And this story is just holy mackerel. I'm like, how do people write? Like, how do people write like this? It's
Uh, well, it,
uh
well, it's interesting. You held up somebody else's book. That's
mhm.
interesting.
Oh yeah. I know. Because I'm
Can we
talking
see
about
one of your book, one of the books you illustrated, please?
sure.
And you
This
and you and by the way, we're talking about Melquea Smith. Your website is
yes.
prettykittypaintings.com. Uh,
Yes.
and don't hate. She's a cat lover. She
Oh,
does have a couple of cats, so I'm sure that the pretty kitty comes in there somewhere. Talk to
oh
me.
yes.
Talk to me, and
So let's see what we
as
got
to
here.
why how the pretty kitty and what that that name, is that because of your fondness for the feline?
Yes. So I had a cat named Princess, and her nickname was Pretty Kitty.
Uh-huh.
And she was pivotal to my just adolescence. She was just like my best friend.
Hmm.
Um, she was definitely someone, she was like a cat who just like had my heart and was just always there for me. And I just kind of, I guess it's a way for me to like immortalize her, but also it just rolls off the tongue, like Pretty Kitty. So
So
I've
let's say the
always
book.
been that.
Yeah.
So my book, one of my books is The Biggest Gift of All.
Uh-huh.
And this was one of my most recent picture books that I have illustrated. And it has so much fun color and talk about using just being authentic, just being able to just share my love of rainbow and color and just all sorts of fun things. Oh, let me see if I can pull. Those are my favorite pages.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
by the way, Melquea, you can see her work at the MLK Art Gallery as part of the Martin Luther King Jr. dinner tonight at the JMA Wireless Dome. Hopefully, you got your tickets already because typically the dinner is sold out. But we've been talking with some of the artists who will be showing their art. Your art, you'll be selling books, paintings. What will you be selling?
Yes. So I will be selling my books. I'll be selling my prints. I'll be selling a few framed prints. I'll also be open-ish for commissions. That all of that also, if I'm sold out at the event, I also have pre-orders set up already on my website,
Hmm.
prettykittypaintings.com/shop.
Hmm.
I'm waiting for more books to come in, so I'm hoping that they come in on time. That's always the fun thing of timing and trying to make this thing work.
Hmm.
So yeah, that's definitely a lot of things that I'm working on, and I will be having my wares for sale as well. If you'd like to support your local Black illustrator.
you you mentioned in your bio your queer identity. How much of that influences your work or your well-being as part of your the way you see the world?
Interestingly enough, that is actually really new. That is something that I'm still exploring, and
Hmm.
I'm still just figuring that out of like, what does that look like? How does that show up in my day-to-day life?
Hmm.
Um, I would even say that for my Black identity as well, like not as new as that identity, but just something as I'm exploring and coming up with that answer for myself, um, to kind of lean onto my Black identity, and that intersectionality. When I was a kid, I never really had that show up in my life, except for just surface level. And also feeling of not Black enough. And so as I've gotten older and I'm exploring that, I'm discovering that no one tells me what Blackness is and how that shows for me. I decide what Blackness is and
Well,
how that share that out.
okay, so there's a theme here because, believe it or not, another artist who we had on this program, this idea of Black identity um, was also a question. So
Yeah.
why was that a question for you? What did you grow up
Mm.
where this had to be something that you questioned?
So I was always picked on for my skin tone and my shade.
Hmm.
And that was something that was a part of pain for me as I was getting older.
Picked on by whom though?
By my peers, by my classmates.
And
Yeah,
were classmates black, white?
yeah, they were Black.
Mm.
And so it's very interesting as I've explored that as a young person getting older and sharing and finding my own tribe of other Black misfits, outcasts, people who are authentically themselves, and also going through the same thing. We still have folks that are going through the same things today,
Mm.
and banding in solidarity and banding in this sort of, you know, there is no there is no true answer of what Blackness is. we do have shared identities, we do have shared experiences, but everyone is individual and we're not all a monolith. And that's something that I've been learning and showing, trying to do my best to show through my illustrations and the books that I
What
illustrate,
what were you trying to show through your illustrations?
that we're not all a monolith and that Blackness itself is so nuanced. And I wish I had 50, 60 million books to show different people, like show different characters in different ways that they showcase their identities.
So, both your parents, I assume, are black, right?
Yes.
And you grew up in a black household, I'm assuming,
Hmm.
right?
Yes.
And yet, here you are struggling with your black identity as it relates to your peers. So, when you say, "Are you black enough?" Even though your your peers were teasing you because of your melanated skin,
Hmm.
why did that make you question whether you were black enough? Is it because you didn't do the same things that they like to do?
Oh yeah.
That's
Oh
what it was.
yeah.
And so then you had,
Yes.
so because of that, you became this other. You became
Oh
other
yeah.
even within your own community because, like you said, I don't want to use, I'm going to say misfit of, not misfit, but you know what I mean? Is that the right word? Is that,
I like I take in the word misfit. I take in the word weirdo. It's not, to me, it's not a bad word.
no,
I
but you know what I
actually
mean?
embrace
You,
it. But I
like,
get it.
so you basically liked all kinds of
Different
things
things. Yeah.
and so that
And
meant that I had that it probably meant that you were then with a different all kinds of groups of people
oh, for sure.
and
Yeah,
and
no.
yeah
I love like different cultures, anime, video games, you name it. And it was definitely something, and I expressed myself in a different way. I expressed myself, whatever, I have no idea what this even means, but what a typical Black kid would express themselves in. Air quotes for the folks who are listening to this. And I don't necessarily know if people didn't like that. I don't know how they felt about it. I don't know if they were threatened by it. What I know is that it was definitely something that was, I don't want to say used against me, but it was definitely something that othered me. And so that, in addition to being picked on for my skin shade, was all of that like kind of culminated into this not feeling Black enough or
I mean
not feeling that. It's really interesting,
it's
especially looking at it now. And I would definitely correct, I don't want to correct you, but just like invite you in of like, I don't struggle with it anymore, thank
anymore.
goodness. It
Mhm.
was definitely something that was a cyclone of uncertainty. But now it's something where it's just like, no, 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 this is who I am and I'm Black and
Yeah,
that's fine.
yeah, I mean and I meant that because
Yeah.
again I hear I I guess I'm just amazed by not amazed that's not the word I want to use but like can I say it this way in all
Hmm.
honesty? I'm like, wow,
Absolutely.
we still struggling with that. Like that's kind of what's
Right. It's
it,
2024. Like what,
right,
like
right.
can
Like,
we
is
move
that still
on?
a thing?
Yeah.
Like what?
Yeah.
Um,
I think
and
too, I'm not sure who the other creator, how old this person was. But this was something that's for me, it's done from my childhood and it's stayed with me as I've gotten older. So it's
mhm,
something that has stayed with me
mhm,
and it's a stay, yeah, it stayed with me and it
mhm.
shaped the way that I perceived myself and also the way that I shared myself with other people in the world. So this is something that was something I was still struggling with that I had to kind of heal and get over and go through.
So when you think about we're in the Martin Luther King Jr. week of
Hmm.
celebrations in community and at the university,
Yeah,
and you think about the world that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. imagined, right? And
yeah.
the world you live in now, how would you compare what you think he was talking about and what you think we are? And I know that's heavy and deep, but what I'm really getting
Yeah.
at is so with that thought and then taking it a step further, what would you say to someone who's like you,
Hmm.
who's eclectic?
Yes, that's such a great word.
Yes,
Eccentric
right.
and eclectic.
Right, in her in their beliefs, right,
Yeah.
in her beliefs, and connectivity, and that showing up in my art. What do you say? How do you reflect on that, and then what do you offer about that?
Hmm. So I have a semblance of hope, of course. I feel like we're getting there. I feel like the things that a lot of folks have struggled with, I don't necessarily say that it's gone, it's away, it's not a problem anymore.
Hmm.
We still have many deep-rooted things that we have throughout our communities
Hmm.
that we struggle with, colorism, hair texturism,
Hmm.
sizeism, like all the isms and the weird things.
Hmm.
But I still have hope because there are folks like me, there are creatives like me, there are people with their different nuanced backgrounds that are sharing their skills and their talents to be able to share that this is something that we aren't a monolith. I
Hmm.
see this cross platform, right now I'm in publishing. I see it in animation. I see it in different forms of entertainment
Hmm.
where we are showcasing people in different identities and different backgrounds and different intersectionalities and being able to show that nuanced lens. And with that, that allows for people to see that and for young people to see that and to embrace it and believe it. And I want I that's I so in reflecting on that and offering that to our audience, I definitely feel like we're at a point where we're at this really good point of being able to see the world for what it is and then also be able to say, well, I feel right when I wear this color, or I feel great when I have my hair this way, or
Hmm.
I feel like, that authenticity is so important. Um, and you just fall into it. You find it as you get older and you find yourself as you get older. So yeah, that's hope. Hopeful.
PrettyKittyPaintings.com, and you have a blog where
I
you're
do.
also giving back and giving advice and talking about your work, and I know that that's important uh, to you. But there's a joy in your books. I don't know how to describe, but it just looks very happy. Even if people are contemplating something sad, there's still a joy in it. So
Yes,
is
absolutely.
that an intentional, like you always want to find something positive, happy, joyful in the work so that there's always something hopeful in it?
I think that's just something that comes out. It kind of comes out of me. I
Yeah.
am usually a joyful, happy person. And
Uh-huh.
that's also something a little bit of an act of a resistance too. I
All right,
remember,
talk about
yeah, definitely like joy is an act of resistance. I use that even when I'm not even actively trying to use it. It's just something that it's just something that comes naturally to me.
it. Mhm.
And especially in addition to my blog, I also have an email list as well that where I go really deep into, being into children's book Illustrator and just sharing what's on my mind and what's inspiring me this quarter and all the things, what music I'm listening to. Like there's a lot of things I like to share also to my audience and my email friends too.
What are you listening to?
Oh boy. So I love listening to chill hop and video game music. Chill hop is like hip hop meets Japanese culture meets just low tempo, but also just it's like a mix or an amalgamation. And it's a whole community of folks who love all of those intersectionalities of cultures and it just blends together. And I find that just a really beautiful, just like a beautiful meeting point of people that love this type of music. And even my mom listens to chill hop. I introduced her to that because there's some music that was sampled from, you know, just sampled from older music that is now remixed into this newer genre. And so I love being able to share that with like my parents and my family too.
Oh, well, Melquia, you can share your art and your
Yeah.
painting. your illustrations with the folks who are attending the Syracuse University MLK dinner, which will be taking place tonight at the JMA Wireless Dome. With your dinner ticket, you can go to the art show, meet Melquea and all the other artists like Lyndon Ladd, who we had on last week. And what a delight to talk to you and
Oh,
feel your energy.
thank you.
Wish you well for your work and hope you do well. And her website is prettykittypaintings.com. And check her out and uh, check out her latest books as well on her website. Melquea, thank you so much. And we
Thank
hope that
you.
you have a good time. I hope you had a good time today.
Yes, I did. This is great. Thank you so much for having me on.
All right. Inspiration for the Nation. Melquea, check her out. Inspiration for the Nation.